Welcome to episode 13 of the Crownsman podcast. You will notice first that my co-host is not as pretty. Hi,
My
Rory.
apologies, everyone. Thank you for that great
You got
introduction.
beautiful blonde hair, though. That's So this is Rory Bamford. You've seen him on the show before. Gowdy is not able to co-host with me today, so Rory's going to step in and see how things go. You're also running sound today.
I am also doing that.
We're going to see how it goes. And we have a guest in today for episode 13 from Power Zone Equipment, the president of Power Zone Equipment, Don Taves. And we're very excited to have him because we've worked a bit together over the last,
18 months?
18 months. Yeah, so
Something like that.
we've got to know your company fairly well. We've got to know you, but we've actually only met in person once,
That's right.
and you and Rory haven't met.
First time today.
This morning.
Yeah.
Strange world we live in now. So thanks for coming on the show, all the way from Colorado.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity. And Crownsman has done a great job for us.
Well-
and we appreciate it.
Oh,
So
thank you very much.
This is my privilege.
Yeah, no, we're very glad, and it's kind of circumstance. You were here, and so we kind of jumped in and did a quick show. So
Yeah.
kind of thanks for doing it such short notice.
Yep.
Most gets at least get a couple weeks prep. But Rory got thrown in today. You kind of got thrown in a couple days ago. So no, it's but nice thing about the show, we have time. We're going to walk through, unpackage a little bit about your company, a bit about the engineering that you offer. I think that's, our audience they're into the industrial sectors, so especially the engineering side of things.
Sure.
We've had an engineer on a couple times, and the audience is always very engaged with them because it's that technical aspect that I think people are really looking for. So let's start off with that. Power Zone, you sell used pumps primarily, but you
Yeah.
do a lot of engineering
Right.
that goes into that. So could you just give me a snapshot of what that is? Because used equipment engineering is not always the first thing that gets put together in a sentence.
Yeah. Well, okay, so we started out buying and selling used equipment. That's what I did back in Saskatchewan in the 90s, and we could go back further than that. But we started out buying and selling used equipment. Well, then, a guy, he'd buy this thing if I fix it a little bit. So you hire a mechanic, and next guy, he would maybe buy it if we packaged it with some auxiliary equipment. So you do that. Well, to do that, sometime you need an engineer, and so then you end up doing some engineering, and then pretty soon it gets a little more exotic, and you need a better engineer. So you go and hire a better engineer and or more knowledgeable or whatever. And so by now, a lot of what we sell is engineered products, but we're still starting a lot of times with a surplus or sometimes a used pump that we rebuild from the ground up. And it isn't just pumps. We've done a lot with generators and turbines and gearboxes and so on. But it tends to be sort of surround the whole pumping industry.
Right. If you're doing a generator, it'll be attached to the pump and that
Most
sort
of the
of
time.
thing. Yeah.
Most of the time.
Was it when you started this? I guess I always thought it was sort of Power Zone because that started in '99, right?
Yeah, we moved there in October '99. Really got started in 2000.
Right.
But
But-
I had a business in Saskatchewan.
That you were also engineering
Yeah.
in that. And who were you serving more when you? Let's go back a bit. When you were starting in Saskatchewan, who were you serving at that time? Was it mostly the energy sector?
It was the heavy oil industry around Lloydminster,
Yeah. Big companies and small companies.
big and
whatever.
small.
Yeah. And so I guess I'll again, it's a short interview, so fortunately we have the time, or short notice interviews, so we have the time. So I'm going to start with the different types of pumps that you're sort of typically serving. And I know you go into one category of pumps, and then from there
Yeah.
It's just multiple different types.
Yeah.
But is there sort of at least a couple main types of pump that Power Zone sort of specialize in?
Yeah. Okay. So, like, when we really sort of started out with pumps, we dealt a lot with reciprocating pumps, triplex pumps, quintuplex pumps. That just means 3 plungers or 5. And there's simplex and duplex too and stuff. But it's a plunger pump where you have a closed cavity with a plunger or a piston, and there's a little difference. And it's creating pressure in a closed cavity with valves and all this and I'm gonna say that the engineering is a little simpler. The math is a little less complex, maybe, but very popular, especially for relatively low volumes and relatively high pressures. You typically use a positive displacement pump, and there's other kinds of positive displacement pumps like peristaltic pumps and progressive cavity pumps and gear pumps and so on. But our business was a lot surrounding the plunger pumps, triplex, quintuplex, and so on. And so we bought and sold used pumps. And actually, when you go way back into my Saskatchewan days, we started out really buying and selling engines, little putt-putt engines,
Oh.
the ones that run the donkeys, flapping up and down the field.
Oh, that was a main.
Yeah,
that was a main thing.
Yeah, the main thing was, Sask Oil had 70 engines sitting around that they didn't know what to do with, and I found a guy in Oklahoma that would buy them. So we started a lot with engines, and then as time went on, pumps. We bought a couple of them and made good money on them. So you look for more, and I guess I'm probably the world's worst planner. I follow my nose.
Well, I'll take
So-
those off. I was gonna.
So I don't know if I ever really had a plan, but if something worked, you did a little more of it, and
Right.
if something didn't work, you did less of it. So and so it turned out that there was a market for pumps, and there was some used ones sitting around, and then in order to sell it, you got to know a little more of it. So find an expert, call them up, and pepper them with a few questions. And people sometimes ask me where I got my education. Well, I say over the phone.
Yeah.
Call an expert.
Yeah.
So then we were doing these recip pumps and engines, and when I moved to Colorado, we did that too. I sold a lot of Ajax engines. It's a particular brand, and there's a particular they're wonderful in that they'll burn almost anything. They're not very efficient. They're noisy. They're heavy. They don't create a lot of power for their weight. The power to weight ratio is poor, but they'll burn the nastiest kind of fuel, and so people like them. They're still popular in some areas.
Yeah.
But so then, though, as time goes on, there's more electrification and less of a market for that. And then our main customer for them, he quit buying them and went another way. So more and more in pumps, and then, though, as time goes on, the centrifugal pumps became more of a thing for us, and our real specialty nowadays is high pressure, multi-stage centrifugal pumps, and we still do the recips, but the centrifugal pumps are, the mathematics and the physics are a little more exotic, a little more engineering involved, so you can leverage your expertise maybe a little better,
Right.
a little less competition, although we have some wonderful competitors out there. But I say that one day they're your competitor, next day they're your supplier, and the next day they're your customer. So good people in the industry. So we, as time has gone on, we do a lot more with centrifugal pumps, and especially the high pressure stuff. which involves high speeds, multi-stage, and there's there the engineering gets a little more exotic.
Are
Yeah.
those used a lot now in the fracking sector, or is it a completely different type of pump? Like what are they using now? Like as
Well-
fracking grows so much.
Yeah, fracking, because it's done typically at very high pressures, uh, they'll typically use a positive displacement quintuplex pump. That's the
Okay.
standard
It goes
nowadays.
back to
Yeah.
that. Okay.
However, the frac water supply is done with centrifugal a lot of time. You got to move the water
Right.
to the pumping site, and then there are places where, like in Wyoming, in the coal bed methane, they don't need such high pressures, and they need higher yet volumes. So there they'll use a centrifugal sometimes.
Okay.
And then if you're moving water up the water's always down below, right? And the wells are drilled up high a lot of times.
Yeah.
So you got to get that water from down below way up high, and so we've rented pumps to people that had to lift it, 2,000 feet to get the water to where the frac site is.
Right.
And in the one thing we deal a lot with the energy industry, oil industry, but in the oil industry and gas industry, you want the oil and gas. What you end up dealing with is water. And so we sell a lot more water pumps than oil pumps, and we sell them too. Pipelines are a good market for us, but a lot of times it's water. Water, you use water for drilling, use water for fracking, use water for servicing, and then you end up with water being produced with the oil, with the gas. You got to dispose of it or move it around. A lot of water pumped in the oil fields.
That makes sense.
So would you say, is there a percentage? Do you think 80% of the pumps you're selling, what would be the number to water to actual oil pumps?
Yeah, likely 80-20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And
vast.
like in some oil fields, the water, and I mean, there are some oil fields, they're lucky they get almost 100% oil, but typically you're dealing with a water cut somewhere between maybe 20% to some fields are 97% water. So you're getting a nice little bit of oil, but you got a lot of water to deal with. And sometimes you got a zone that'll take that water on gravity. You just pour it in a well, and then the gravity will push it into the formation. But a lot of areas, your zones are operating at a higher pressure than that, and you got to push it there. And so then you need a pump, and sometimes a very, very large one.
Yeah, so this is something I've actually wondered about your company, and just over the time, I just haven't really got a chance to ask. Is this, because I know you do the engineering. Now, are you engineering off of their specifications? And I'm sure this answer changes depending on the company. Or are they sending you what exactly they need, and then you're building the pumps off those specs? Or are you actually saying, this is what you're trying to accomplish, so we're going to build what you need?
Well, okay, my favorite customer is the guy that calls me up and says, "Hey, I need to move some water." And okay, how much? What are you doing? How far are you pushing it? What do you got to achieve? And then we design a system to make them work. Now, I have engineers that can and actually do read through 80 pages of specs. Okay. If there's 80 pages of specs, then I give it to them. And, I mean, I got a guy that I think actually enjoys that. I'm not sure, but
He tells you he does.
but a lot of like the smaller type companies, they don't have an engineer on staff, but they got a knowledgeable guy that knows what he wants to do.
Right.
And so he might not be a pump expert, but he's an expert at what he does. So then we provide the expertise on pumping and how to get it there.
Right.
So you're actually designing the system.
Yeah.
They're giving you a goal. You're designing the entire system.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
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 And then sometimes it's very prescribed. But I mean, like, okay, if a customer really they have their own engineering on staff, or they're using a outside engineering group and this and that, and in many cases those projects are planned years in advance and this and that, and they go to Sulzer or Flowserve or one of the big outfits, and we never hear about them. But sometimes they need something in a hurry. I mean, they don't have a year to wait. So then they call us, and we get involved. And the the problem is if you get very, very, very specific about exactly what you want, then our 1,500 pumps in stock aren't enough. We'd need 20,000. But
Right.
A lot of times we'll have almost exactly the right pump for them. But if you get really specific about bearing type and a bunch of specs, we may not have exactly that. But if you simply want to move water from here to there, and we'll have a pump for you. If you specify that it's got to be stainless, we might probably have a pump for you yet. But if you specify that you want a certain type of bearing and a certain this and that, then we may, as the specs get a little closer, then sometime we go and buy a new one, and we modify too. But a lot of our customers, we do the pump selection, we do the engineering, we get them a system that works.
Right. Is that so? How many of your customers, when you start, they're building an oil field? So how many of them? How much of your business? You mentioned that the now I forgot the Ajax.
Yeah, Ajax engines. Yeah, I love them things.
Are they allowed to be used in a lot of areas still?
No, the Clean Air Act kind of wiped them out a little bit. I mean, there's areas, and overseas maybe, but it's getting a little tougher. I mean, nowadays, really electric is the right way to go. But, But hey, they don't make that
Is that happening
popping noise
on the pump side as well? With the pumps, they're going electric power
a lot
for
of
the most part.
Yeah. But, I mean, or you get a Tier 4 engine and drive it with diesel or natural gas.
Right.
So what I was going to ask is these. You said that he stopped buying, he switched to a different, so you had to sort of switch your product offering because you were selling a lot of those pumps to him. You said it's one of your suppliers.
You're talking about one of my customers that was buying Ajax engines?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So how much of your business is once a customer realizes, okay, you can adjust the specifications to get what I need to do, but I don't have as much of a lead time. I'm sure if it's used, there's a price. There's
a bit of a price advantage at times.
Price advantage. How much of your business then is built off of? Okay, now I need another one. Now I need another one. Or is it a lot of restart with a new customer and referral for your business?
Well, we sure love them repeat customers, and we get quite a few. But like some of this stuff is built for it's not built for to use for a week or 3 months or whatever. A lot of it is very long-term stuff, and they aren't buying one every year in some cases. So, in some cases we'll sell something to a customer and we maybe hear from him 3-5 years down the road, then now he needs another one. Okay.
Yeah.
But we a lot of our business is repeat, but we're always looking for the new one too, because it seems like there is you need the new ones to come along to make it happen.
Yeah, I noticed with from my a little bit of background with electrical that you'll run into situations where the electrical has been updated over the last 10 years, but someone is still working within an older system, and so they need very specific types of electrical that can then be inserted into that system without having to replace the entire thing, which would cost millions. Do you run into that with pumping systems, or is it not?
Oh yeah.
Do you see the same thing?
Yeah, all the time. Yep.
Yeah.
Older fields would have like the older equipment styles.
Okay, so you had a 500 horsepower pump and your whole system is 480 volt, which works for for that maybe, but now you're going to a 3,000 horsepower system, and now you need a 4160 volt system. So in some cases you end up selling them a transformer and helping them design the whole variable frequency drive VFD system, switch gear. Everything has to be upgraded, right? Because everything's bigger. But and yeah, then there's sometimes that means longer lead times and this and that. But a lot of times we have suppliers for that sort of thing, so we can get her done quick that way too.
Yeah. What do you think is the main? Is it the cost savings, or is it lead times? Do you think is the main driver for new customers, or is it pretty much split?
Well, a lot of times it's actually lead time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when we rebuild a pump, we actually end up with a lot more hours in that pump.
That's the thing, because you are engineering things.
Well, yeah, and like to take something apart and clean everything up and make it pretty and nice again. That's time consuming. Okay.
Yeah.
So like when they build that thing new in the factory, they don't have to take it apart and they don't have to clean things up. It already is, right?
Yeah.
And they put it through their CNC machines and like it's fast and efficient, and they end up with not very many hours in it actually in the final assembly. Yeah, there's a lot of hours go into it before that. But so when we take and there's like we find that small pumps, it's not worth it anymore. Like you don't try and rebuild a pump that you can buy new for $10,000. It's not worth it.
Right.
But a pump that's worth $250,000 new, yeah, we can save them some money. And we do. But the real big attraction is if you got an oil field coming on and you're going to be producing oil in 2 months, and you're waiting a year for a pump to pump the stuff. Well, in that 10 months of time, you can pay for that pump many, many times over.
Right. Yeah.
So the issue is to get it there and get it there on time, and you go into mining too. I mean, your mine is flooding.
Yeah.
You don't want to wait a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that that I know you do a lot primarily in the energy sector, but you do move into mining as well. Is that where you get a lot of the mining work? Is where I guess the dewatering and projects like that is where your company would really come in, right?
Yeah, mine dewatering is good for us. Yeah, but I mean, there's boiler feed pumps in food plants, in petrochemical plants. There's just high pressure process pumps in refineries and this and that. They're just everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, I talk about high pressure because that's a little bit of a specialty, but we have many, many pumps for all kinds of processes. And so refineries, mining, food processing, all kinds of process industries, steel mills.
Right.
Steel mills have been good for us.
Interesting.
They use these high pressure pumps for descaling. You get this mass of red hot steel coming through, and it goes through the roller, and then there's scale on top of it. So they shoot high pressure water at it.
Oh.
And we rebuilt a pump for a guy in Serbia, an outfit in Serbia that their pump was down, and it had a major crash, and they needed one in a hurry, so they sent it over to us, and we rebuilt it.
Oh, they actually sent that pump to you for you to refurbish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what kind of lead time would that be?
That was I think that one was about, it was likely 15 weeks or so.
That's pretty quick.
Still up. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's with shipping and everything? It was.
I think so, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The shipping probably added something to that.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it going to... there was something it's a personal favorite topic of mine, is the rebuilt, refurbished debate
Oh, sure.
that happened
Yes. Thank you for asking this question.
in the used industry. I mean, I've seen it get fairly heated before.
Yeah.
Because there is a different view. Well, what is considered rebuilt? What's considered refurbished? What's considered reconditioned?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we've had that
what-
discussion.
what's your take on this?
We've had that discussion, and one guy thinks that refurbished is a higher grade than rebuilt, and the next guy thinks exactly the opposite. So I don't know as I actually have answers.
Yeah.
I do know that, like, I mean, the industry is a bit, how might one say, a bit tarnished maybe, but by paint job overalls, the Sherwin-Williams overall. We use Sherwin-Williams. It's good stuff. But, but you gotta go a little further than that, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know the right word to use because the words mean different things to different people. But the bottom line is, if it's done right, you get right down to the if it's done right, really the only difference between new and rebuilt is that you started out with molecules that were already solid instead of liquid. In your steel.
Right.
You didn't start with molten steel. You started with something that's there, but that was already in a shape. But I mean, at the same time, there are situations where where some of our stuff you can't get it to that place. Well, then you don't
Right.
try and sell it as a 0-hour rebuild. Because we kind of like to use a standard. What would I want if I was the customer?
Right.
And now I know what's inside this thing. And would I be happy if I was the customer knowing what's inside there?
Yeah.
That's the standard.
Well, if we could go then to, so if you're doing a rebuild,
Yeah.
that's what is on, maybe let's go with the most common type of pump that you sell. On that pump, what is being done to it on I'll say a full rebuild, that this is going to be up to full specifications, like you said, a 0-hour rebuild. What's actually going into rebuilding that pump?
Well, take it completely apart, clean the parts right down to clean and spiffy like they're new.
Yeah.
Do a full inspection. Sometimes you end up having to remachine the split line. New casing rings, new wear rings. It's basically what, like you say, in a centrifugal pump, and a lot in a recip also. It's the surfaces that's what's worn. Okay,
Right.
It's the basic underlying body of the thing is fine.
Yeah.
It'll never be affected, but the surfaces are eroded or corroded or damaged in some way. You have to bring those surfaces back to their original condition, and when you do that, it's in no way inferior to a new pump.
Right.
Now, and I don't want to, like, there are some advances, in the pumping industry, material selection and some of the like the cooling and the bearing arrangements and that sort of thing. But actually overall pumping technology, actually how you create pressure with a positive displacement or a centrifugal system, I mean, that essentially hasn't changed in 60 years. The technology is the same. So if you have a pump that's even as old as I am, you get that thing back to its original condition, and it'll work just as well as a brand new one.
Yeah.
But okay, then there is such a thing as a thing being corroded, for instance, and you
Right.
can't quite get there. Well, then you don't try. But a lot of times that's actually rare. Most of the time, we can bring something back to its original condition, and it works like new, and it's good for many years.
Well, one of the things that I wonder is if you, I know from working with you and doing due diligence of sort of how you're perceived in the industry, and Power Zone's a very respected brand. How do you outline that for the customer that you've delivered, that you've went in and done all those, and you haven't just done a paint job, because once you close it back up, it is. So, and I know, and I asked this question because I know that there are steps that you take to do that.
Yeah.
So how are you, especially to a new customer that's, they've maybe done a little bit of due diligence, but you're a fairly new customer to them. How do you show to them that we have done all this work? What is it? I mean, it can't just be brand. You must have a steps that you take through your engineering and that to show that we've done all these steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we do a pretty extensive pictorial record of the rebuild.
Yeah.
And we love customer inspections. I mean, come bring it on, come and see us. We love it. They usually leave more impressed than what they come,
Yeah.
But then we do a full rebuild report, both a detailed, with all the numbers and clearances and stuff like that written in there, and then a little bit of a glossy just to show them, with the pictorial record of how it came in and what was done, and how.
That's a good. That's a progress. The pictorial progress. That's a good way to do it for customers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's limits to that. If you set out to hide flaws, then you could probably still hide flaws.
Right.
But we also have a vested interest in making sure that it'll actually work.
Right. Yeah. But you do all the documentation and even the pictorials, though.
Yeah.
So that's how a customer, even if they're
Typically.
new. Yeah.
Yeah. Typically we do.
Really good for overseas customers as well if they're not actually able to
Yeah.
come over and inspect.
Well, how many customers take advantage of, come on and see us? How many do you get? A lot of customers that'll actually, I mean, some of these projects are quite expensive, so I don't know how much the pumping is a cost in comparison to everything else. How many customers actually will come on to site?
Well, on the big expensive jobs, we probably actually meet in person with 80% of them.
Oh, is it that high?
Most of them will.
Okay.
Most of them will send a rep sooner or later.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might not be before the order, but during the process.
Right.
somewhere.
Yeah. That was my next question. Are they're coming mid-process to sort of get a feel for what you're doing? And
A lot of times.
yeah.
Yeah, and we like it. That's the best way.
Yeah. Well, it's a big question in the industry is how do you trust, you go to an auction site and the wheel loader rolls off from one truck onto yours. What are you getting?
Yeah.
And
It is what it is.
it is what it is. Yeah. So, but
We buy that way,
yeah,
Good way to buy.
they don't let you take it apart first.
And sometimes you're disappointed.
Yeah.
Most people are honest though. I mean, we buy a lot of stuff over the phone, and most people will treat you right. There's a few that'll hook you, but you don't want to lose faith in humanity right away.
Right. I guess you kind of over the years you kind of start to filter out who to
Yeah, we do.
who to avoid. Yeah. It's as large as the industry is in dollars wise. It's actually a very small community once it starts to break down.
You're right.
Yeah. Let me move on to the. You touched on it a bit about building the company. So I kind of wanted to go back into that because it's expanded over quite a few years, and every time we talk, you get these extra little tidbits. And I really didn't realize you were talking off camera that you actually started with your father and your brother.
Yeah, the first business that I was in, was my dad and my older brother.
And that was mostly engines and things like that?
No, that was my dad had a history in manufacturing, actually agricultural manufacturing.
Oh.
And then we tried to become farmers in Saskatchewan, and we weren't smart enough for that. So, there we were we kind of caught on that here we are in a heavy oil field, and there was a lot of little weird stuff that they needed back then. This was in the 80s, and And so we started building engine mounting rails and gates to keep cows out of the pump jack, and
Oh,
and belt guards. And then we built this little gear drive that in the heavy oil, you want your pump jack. They used normal pump jacks at that time. Nowadays it's more screw pumps, progressive cavity pumps, but they still use some pump jacks. But they had to turn them very, very slowly. So we designed this gear drive, and we called it a planet drive. It was a planetary gear drive that would go on these putt-putt engines and enable them to slow that pump jack way down. And the just little history there. The reason for that is that the polish rod, the rod going down to the pump the pump is way down in the hole, okay?
Yeah.
And that rod would not fall fast through. It's like honey or roofing tar, and then that rod is heavy, but
Yeah.
it won't go down very fast. And so you had to turn your pump jack slow enough so that the rod would stay in contact with so you didn't have impacts on your on your horse head. You don't want impact. You want that to be go down steady and then come back up. So we built a gear drive like that, and then we started building the actual little pump jacks too. The small ones, 40s and 57s was the size, and we sold many of them in Kindersley, Saskatchewan, and up at Spirit River, Alberta.
were you still farming at this time, or
Given that up, we let the smart guys take that one over.
Yeah, there's a lot of technology just in that too. That's a different topic, but yeah.
We'd lost a little money all that already, so we let we rented out what ground we had left, and we started building this stuff. And I mean, it went like gangbusters until suddenly in '86 the price dropped. I don't know if you remember. You're too young for that.
heard about it?
Price dropped to $9 a barrel.
Really?
And it had been up at 28 or so. We thought that was pretty good then.
Is this the
Nowadays
same round? Like this is when did the interest rates too? They went. Was that the same
Yeah, it was
period?
about the same time.
It was
Like-
87. That was when Japan also crashed, right? So it was all kind
probably,
of
yeah.
happening.
And it was
then.
National Energy Program got in there, and
Oh, yeah.
and
Right.
there was kind of a perfect storm of bad things happened to the oil fields. And I mean, suddenly, we still had our market share, but what's 40% of zero?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So-
the issue.
So we and we were blowing and going building these pump jacks, and suddenly, I mean, we had Conoco. They had a bunch of them on order, and they canceled it. And I didn't know you could cancel a purchase order. And I don't want to downplay Conoco. I'm sure they had their own issues. Nice customer, but bottom line, there was outfits that canceled purchase orders. There was outfits that went broke. There was, and it was a bloodbath. And so, we started building logging trailers and this and that, but by that time, it was too little too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were, I think, probably when the bank shut our doors, we were probably making a little money again. I'm not sure, but we probably were. But it was too little too late. So, we were out of it. Like I say, it was 3 years after the big crash in '86
Okay.
when they closed our doors Friday the 13th.
Oh,
October.
of course they did.
Yes, sir. That was the day.
Of course they did.
You should never take a call on that date.
No.
That's a mistake you made.
I don't think that was a call. They showed up in the yard. So then, actually, I started. We had really good relationship with our own banker. Now,
Yeah.
his boss, he was a little tough, but it got a little strained with him and even myself. But I somewhere in there I decided that there's actually a verse in the Bible: "Seek the peace of the country in which you're held captive." It was an instruction to the Jews when they went to Babylon. Seek the peace of the country in which you're held captive. And that one hit me, that what I had to do is I had to start looking out for the bank. That was, okay, they hadn't done anything really wrong. We couldn't pay them, so work for their benefit. So I started doing that. I would help them. I helped them arrange the auction sale. I helped them, and then I helped them sell off the inventory. They didn't want to put the inventory on the auction. You get slaughtered that way. So I started liquidating stuff for them. They paid me a real nice commission on that stuff, and that is actually some of the very first stuff that I did in used and surplus equipment. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, I enjoyed that. It was, I didn't, and see, suddenly then the cost, what it cost in the first place, doesn't matter anymore. It's what you can get,
Right.
which is the principle that you have to operate in any kind of a used equipment market. That what the thing cost in the first place is of very little import. It's what you can get.
Right.
And so on that principle, I sold a bunch of stuff for the bank, and we ended up being, good friends. And a few years later, I bought the building back from them. That was the last thing they had to liquidate. And
That was part of the liquidation, actually.
Yeah.
Like buying it back from them.
yeah, well, I mean, they had listed it and tried to sell it, and it was in rural Saskatchewan. And
Right.
nowadays it's probably worth a lot of money, but in that day and age, you couldn't hardly give it away. Somebody, if they wanted a building, they wanted it in Lloydminster, right?
Yeah.
So finally, I made them an offer, and they took it and actually financed me part of it, and this banker that I'd got a little tense with, I learned some lessons about holding one's temper and gauge in check somewhere in those years.
I'm
Mostly
laughing
it's
because I'm still learning those lessons.
Me too. So but this banker, he come walking into Norm's office. Norm was our banker. He was always good with him, but John come walking in there and shook my hand and said, this couldn't go to a better man. And that was a real, just it was a beautiful ending to what had been a very tense situation at times, a few years earlier. I mean, there were times when he wouldn't have waved at me on the street. And, so it was good.
And what that story is over how many years did it take to liquidate?
Well, about 3.
3 years.
Yeah. I mean, most of the stuff was gone within a year probably. But I think, well, see, then I rented. I actually rented. The shop was on my dad's place. So, and I was living in this little house trailer with 4 children by that time, and a little old 14 by 70 house trailer, and we had a little lean-to, but we were crammed in there. So, when my dad moved out, and he moved down here to BC, over here in Abbotsford, but we really wanted that big house, and it was sitting there empty, and we were a mile down the road, crammed in this little trailer, and then, but we were broke, so you couldn't build nothing, but that's the one time my wife got, when the bank turned me down and we couldn't rent it, then she wrote a letter to this banker.
Oh.
Very out of character for her, but she did.
When it comes to kids, though, then
Yeah. So her mother lion instinct took over somewhere, and he relented, and he rented us that house.
Really?
Oh, that's.
And so there I was on the same place as this big shop was, and so then, I mean, it worked out good for me. I helped them then with their auction sale. I helped them liquidate stuff, and then pretty soon they rented me a little piece of it, to put some stuff in, and then in the meantime we built a house a mile away, and well, then it just kind of made sense to buy that big shop over there instead of building another big one, because I needed more room, so I bought it from them. And then my younger brother, he moved back from BC. He'd get married in the meantime, this and that, and he moved back up there and moved into what had been my dad's house, and That's where he still lives.
Oh,
Oh.
is he still there?
Is he still doing the? Now, is he the one that you mentioned? I think that was before we started recording. That
Yeah.
when you moved to the U.S., then he took over the
Yeah.
business you
Yeah.
the next business you started.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Okay.
my dad actually moved back there after a while too, and then him and my younger brother Bernie, they took
Okay.
over, and it's still going. Rotation Power and Equipment.
Okay.
Yep, they're doing a good job of servicing their oil field customers over there.
Yeah, so they're more the service side
Yeah.
in the oil fields, and
Yeah.
then you're
In the
you're-
meantime, Dad's out of it, and Bernie's running it
Right.
himself. But yeah,
Yeah.
they service the oil companies over there.
yeah,
Yep.
and then Power
And
Zone.
he still does a lot with those putt engines.
Yeah.
He's the guy. I mean, if I get one, I try and sell it to him.
Right.
He won't pay me much.
Older or younger brother?
Younger. He's 10 years younger. My partner in the first business was an older a brother, a year older, Randy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned that sort of the inspiration of how you dealt with the banker over that. I mean, well, the time that you ran into the trouble with them, the time that must have been over five years or so.
Yeah, it was basically from 86 to 89. Yeah.
So that verse has sort of sent you in the direction to work with them. And for me, I've watched, I watch athletes get interviewed or people, and they'll touch on maybe a Bible verse or their beliefs, and then I notice a lot of times the interviewer kind of glosses over it and they move on to the next part. I never have liked that in an interview because it's such a high value to.
It's
to
an
who-
essential part of who we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you don't have those beliefs, then of course it wouldn't be something. But you do, and when I took the trip, I've been down to Colorado. I've seen your facility. I met your son Carson. Spoke with him on the phone. I spoke with people from your team, seen how you operate, and been to lunch with you and said grace before the meal. So it's a humble faith you have, but it is very clear that it is part of how you run your business, how you make your decisions. It's clear on how your son conducts himself, and I'm sure your other sons, I haven't met them. So I guess that's my take on it. But for you, how much of a role does that play in how you operate your business, how you've grown? I mean, it hasn't been without struggle, as we just went over. So how much of a role does that play in sort of your day-to-day, your faith?
Well, I guess, yeah, we're no different than anybody. We make mistakes and we fail from our ideals sometimes, but at an essential level, it informs our walk of life, and I mean, if you want to sleep well at night, you got to live what you believe, and so I guess it's at the heart of, I guess I'd say, everything we do. Yeah, and I don't know. Some people maybe say don't mix faith too much with business or whatever. I don't know how you could not do that, but I don't really talk about it so much, but it better inform how we operate. It has to.
It's like the
Otherwise,
foundation.
it's not real. So
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's what I always thought when people kind of gloss over it, and it has to inform a lot of what you do.
amen.
If-
It
yeah.
does. It has to.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know. I mean, I want, what I really want is for people when I'm done dealing with them that they not that they admire me, but they admire what I stand for and the God whom I serve. Now, I'm not saying that I get to that level. I'm still working on that, on being everything I would like to be.
You're still trying to get the original pump at the right price.
Yeah.
No, well, not so that much that. I mean, I like we all do, we disappoint ourselves sometimes.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
at the same time, yeah, the God whom I serve, that he's central to my being,
Yeah.
and that's how I want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And but you know, yeah, we live in this real world, and we sometimes we disappoint ourselves. That's the like. Long before I disappoint you or disappoint someone else, I've disappointed myself,
Yeah.
and I don't like that.
Right.
So that I guess that's where I'm coming from on that. But it does inform, and it should,
Yeah.
what we do and how we do it.
Yeah. Well, I think too is I think it's for even for myself, my own personal beliefs is, I think it can be perceived as. I guess sometimes I see it that it's portrayed as. I guess it's this personal thing that a lot of people try to, and I'm probably similar to. I don't bring it into. I don't go into a meeting and let someone know. Okay, these are my beliefs, and this is where I was on Sunday. That's not what I'm even thinking about.
Yeah.
But I do think. They're not mixed business with your beliefs and that type of thing. I think it almost is putting a mask on in a way, and I have very few people in my life of any belief that respect that
Oh, yeah.
respect someone that puts on sort of a facade.
Mm-hmm.
And so why would, again, I'm not going to walk in and talk about the topic that is not what we're meeting about.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to go in and somebody wants to get to know me to do business with me, I don't want them to be surprised by something a year later.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a strange thing. There's a professional way to do it, but I think it could almost lead to dishonesty if you're not sort of who you are, and your faith it's a huge part of who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been told sometime or before that, that if the first thing a guy tells you is how good a Christian he is or whatever, watch him.
Yeah.
And I mean, that hurts me because it's not supposed to be that way. But I mean, I actually have been. I mean, I've been hooked by a guy that was very, very open and forthright with his faith.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something that really informed his decision making,
No.
And it wasn't God's fault, it was him that was astray. God's
Yeah.
still the same. He's trustworthy
Yeah. Yeah.
every time.
Well, and I think that's why I brought it up even in this format, because like I said, when I came out to Colorado and spent some time with you, and I got to spend a couple days, it wasn't just an hour meeting, and it wasn't. There was, when I actually think about it, there was really no talk of faith, but it was. That's what I said. It was sort of a humble faith.
I hope
and,
so.
and so that left an impression on me. Why I bring it up, and I wanted to. When we were talking the pre-interview, you basically said, "No, there's nothing that's off limits. You can go ahead." So I went ahead.
Works for me.
And
I regard humility as the essential human virtue that we need, because it's the only thing we can come to the table with when we meet our Maker.
Right.
Is our humility. We better not go there figuring on our goodness being very impressive, because it ain't.
Right. You can only try.
Yeah.
You can only try. And I'm going to completely switch gears on you. And but it leads into this, because I want to talk about the difference when you're dealing with. You were talking about specifications, different companies. Sometimes you're engineering it. When you're dealing with a large company as opposed to a small oil supplier, what is the big differences you see when you're trying to provide a large company that's got, they're multiple oil fields, multiple interests. They might own several different companies or more, as opposed to the guy who's drilling his second well, that kind of thing. What is the main difference, either both professionally how they are, but also the different challenges and facilitating those transactions with those two very distinctly different type of customers.
Yeah. Yeah, the 80 pages of specs versus, here's what I need to do, help me do it.
Yeah, and executives and banks
Yeah.
and all the different things that come into
and,
play.
insurance requirements
Yeah,
and you gotta relate to the whole industry, and I mean there's area like if somebody wants 36 new matching pumps, to do a pipeline, we're kind of out of that game.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get there someday. I don't know, but that same outfit, they have a spur line that somebody wasn't doing enough planning early enough or whatever, and now their main pipeline's almost done, and they need to get this spur in there, so
Yeah.
they need two pumps, and they'd prefer them to be matching. So then that same outfit might call us, and like a lot of times it's like, okay, why do they have 80 pages of specs? Because there's a reason for every one of them, right? But sometimes the guy that wrote those specs, I mean, forgive me, but I'll say he doesn't know as much as I do about
Right.
about that particular subject. He knows more than I do generally, but about a particular thing, maybe, but whatever. So we can relate to that, but then I get my engineer to do it. He's good at that,
right.
and we'll prepare that kind of a quote. And then, but the small guy, I mean, the essential human need is to be respected and appreciated, right? So, like we have people call us and they're a small customer, but hey, treat them like they're real too, because they might, even if they aren't maybe nowadays, they might someday be a big customer, and so you try and treat them that way too. So we'll but they don't have the bunches of specs. They just have a project they need a little help engineering it. We do that for them.
Right. So their demands, and essentially because you're building it using your own expertise, not off trying to filter through the engineer, the companies that sent you their 80 pages, you're not having to refilter all that
Right.
through them. So you're able to facilitate, which obviously
Yeah.
time is money. So you're able to facilitate to a smaller customer.
Yep.
And more within his budget as opposed to the 80-page version of it, right?
Yeah, and I mean some of them, they don't have a lot of money to work with.
Right.
They'll accept something, a little older, maybe a little less ideal, maybe not bang on spec.
Right.
Save some money and get into production.
Yeah.
And we're good with that.
Right. I guess that's when used. It's always different. Every project's a little bit
everyone-
different.
And lots of the customers have, it seems like from being in that industry, when it's a smaller customer, it's a range.
Yeah.
If you can
Yeah,
find that
yeah,
range,
yeah,
you can fit them in it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we love them guys.
Yeah.
It's part of our bread and butter.
It's
Yeah.
it's a backbone of so much of the industry
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Well, it always surprises me that even here in BC, that when you look at how many businesses are small businesses, it's a staggering amount. You
Yeah.
think, because the big companies you see the Walmarts, you see for shoes, you'll see Nike, you'll see the big oil companies. But once you get below that, it spreads out across, thousands of people, millions of people employed.
Yeah.
The millions of one or two people company, it's staggering actually.
It really is. Yeah.
For anybody who's watching the show, take a moment to look through and you'll see they talk about small companies, how much of everything is built around these little tiny companies.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's something.
And they don't really hit the news,
No.
No.
So some big outfit lays off 500 workers, that gets in the news.
Yeah.
But what's not in the news is that those same 500 workers most of them are snapped up in the next couple of months by small companies that are that are just out there doing a job and not making waves in the papers, but
Yeah.
they're just doing it.
Yep.
Yeah. And some great little. I mean, there's a lot of people that do very well with those little companies,
Yeah.
and
Amen.
they don't
Amen.
spread out too thin, and they just can keep kind of going along.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've done a couple. We'll keep it. What are we at? We're at an hour.
Or an hour. Yeah.
Yeah, I got 15 more minutes. I got to ask about a couple, or even just one or two interesting projects that you've done, because I know you've done. Again, being at when I was at your shop and your office, I saw the map with all the little
Yeah.
tags of where you've worked in the world, and it's quite impressive.
Yeah.
There must be a couple projects though that stand out. You know, the first one that comes to mind, that kind of go, yeah, that was quite the deal.
Yeah. Well, one fun one was we got a call from an gold mine in Ghana, and their mine was flooding. Their pumps had failed, several of them, kind of in a chain, and we just happened to have a pump that had been from a canceled order from a oil pipeline,
Yeah.
and it was sitting there, and we shipped that thing within a week. Don't want to sound like we could always do that.
It's great when you can, though. It's so
No
great.
1 week guarantee on the website.
But we shipped her over there on an airplane, a big pump, like it, I don't know, 1,000 horsepower. And my son Carson went over there, and a half a mile below sea level. They're inland a little ways, but the elevation isn't real high, and they were down. I think they were pumping from the 900-meter level, and put that pump down there and got her pumping. Later I went over there too. I got down to the
Oh, you did go over there. I didn't realize that.
later, yeah. And so I've been a half mile below sea level. The water was coming in too,
Oh, really?
into the mine. you could see. I mean, you could see why they needed pumps. You know,
Yeah.
there was water dripping everywhere, and when you actually got down there to where the pump was, of course they had a big sump and they had other pumps
Yeah.
pumping from different places, but there was water flowing, where we were walking, and so you could definitely see why. I think they said that if their pumps would all fail, they'd get 6 feet a day of water rise in that mine.
This
So-
is an open pit.
no,
Oh.
shaft mine.
Oh, it's a shaft mine. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, so you're underground then,
Yeah,
and it's filling up with water.
yeah. You're underground and it's filling up with
Probably
water.
a gold mine. I would
Yeah,
presume.
gold mine. Ghana has lots of gold.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a neat experience, and we built some very large. We got 5 20 V4000s. That's a large MTU engine, kind of built in Germany, 3,600 horsepower, and we built some centrifugal pump packages with those that went to Colombia.
Oh,
To do dewater or water injection, water disposal injection in Colombia. That was a fun job. That was back in 2012.
yeah.
Yeah,
Those are massive units, right? Those MTUs.
yeah, they're big. That was the biggest engine we could find. That was there's bigger engines, but they turned when you get much beyond that, they turn to be big, slow speed engines
Okay.
that get very, very heavy. So these were 1,800 RPM engines.
They're still
They-
that
they-
big,
and,
or
and
still that fast?
Yeah, they had 20 cylinders, 3,600 horsepower, and then a gearbox, a gear increaser, and then the pump. And we got some special disengageable couplers made in Germany, and it was a bit of an engineering project, but yeah, that was a fun one.
What's your team like when they? I know you only paid for 2-hour parking, so I won't keep you too much longer. But what's your team like when they get those types of projects? Is it sort of an exciting thing for that to show up?
Oh yeah. Everyone's enthused. Yeah, we work. I have a tremendous team. Like I talked to other business owners and so on, and they, talk about how hard it is to get good help and this and that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know how to be polite, but we have a tremendous team of good people.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, some people complain about the new generation. I don't know. I'm talking to a younger guy, so I better be careful. But
Yeah, we
Yeah, we're gonna get so offended right now.
but
I might
really,
just be aging well. You never know. I mean,
but really, in my experience, there's been some cultural shifts and this and that, but it's the same good stuff
yeah.
in the young people of today, and we have just a really, really good team of people,
Yeah.
and a lot of them, not all of them, are people of faith, but a lot of them are,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a drug-free workplace that helps to weed out some of the ones that maybe in the long run shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
But good people.
Well, I mean, I got a chance. I spoke with Carson many times, your son, and I mean, he's just, of course, your son. You might be a little bit biased, but from my perspective, I mean, he's just gold. He's one of those,
Yeah, he's good.
and he asks a lot of questions. He'll just kind of keep picking away until he understands it, and
Yeah.
you can see that when you go out. When I saw your facility, you can see it that. It's the result of questions. How are we going to do this? You can just see the setup of it.
Yeah.
And that I don't. You meet some companies and you meet sort of the leader of the company, and you just see them imprinted over everything, and it's a compliment to their brain power. But there's the other type when you go and you can see that there was a result of a lot of input.
Sure.
And I think long term that gets a lot better results. And I could really see that even in the meeting with your team, you can see that there was. Well, I remember I was getting questions from everybody, and which is what you're looking for, because then you're not just getting one person's. Okay, one person doesn't know this, so my whole job is going to be to explain this one thing, and sometimes I've seen it with people that will get hung up on that one thing. And there's a whole bunch of other really important things.
How true.
And it just gets basically glossed over because one person's sitting there and they just don't say anything. And I found it was very clear that no, there is 3 or 4 people sitting here, and each one of them has an agenda it's just very clear. In a short little interview, it's hard to describe, but
Sure.
Is that an on purpose thing for you? Do you run the company like that, or is it more personality?
Well, yeah, we do stuff by consensus. If there's one dissenter, you really kind of want them on board before you really go forward. And I'm not saying we always would, but but in general terms, we run on consensus.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's not very autocratic or top driven or whatever. Okay, I have 2 boys that work with me, and I have a couple of sons that don't, and a daughter and a son-in-law that don't either. But although I've been in business with most of them in other ways too, but I'll tell you a little story that really informs how I operate a little bit. When I had my oldest sons were, I don't know, maybe 14 and 11 or something like that, and they always wanted to go and work for my brother Bernie. And I'd work for them, but they'd always, invariably, I mean, and he could get them to do the nastiest stuff. Like,
Of course.
I mean, they'd go over there, and dig in the mud or whatever, and they loved to work for him. And so I don't know just what the conversation was, but one day I asked my son, and this is Trevor, he still works for me or with me, and he and I don't know, this come up in conversation. He said, "Well, Dad," he says, "when I work for you, it's like I'm working for you, and when I go to Bernie's, it's like I'm working with him."
Mm-hmm.
And boy, that hit me square between the eyes, like that kind of honest feedback, you should pay extra for it, but I got it for free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you sit up I mean, I really sat up and took notice. You know, what was really happening underneath here, and I don't know exactly what I changed. I think my boys and my people there, I think if you would ask them, I think they would say, yeah, I work with, and that's the term I like to use. I work with these people. I work with my sons. They don't work for me. They're
Yeah.
smarter than I am by now. They're better working and or better looking and more accomplished, and they get more done too. But you know what? They still appreciate me, and that's been the secret of our family. That's really been I think at the essence of how well it works. I know I talk to a lot of guys that have their children, you know, or tried to, or maybe even still do have their children work for them. But I hear sometimes business owners tend to share a little bit sometimes, and I hear of situations where it doesn't work very well, you know, and I wish it did, because I'm a big believer in dads working with boys and boys working with dads, okay? And I wish it did work better for everybody, because I love that. But I've thought sometimes, you know, like when I think of working with my boys, and I always think I'm getting the long end of the stick. I'm getting more out of this than what I deserve. And you know what? They feel the same way. And so that's a lovely way to run a partnership, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's not that I'm so smart or good, but I've had some nice instruction along the way, and some of it come from them.
Yeah.
Well, Don, thank you very much. I think that's a good note to wrap up on, and I want to thank you for coming. We appreciate you coming out here, and we extra appreciate just being open and kind of letting us just ask the questions. Sometimes we're in quite a structure within these shows, so it's nice to just be able to kind of ask what I want and I'm ready to jump in. So we appreciate it. Thank you
that
very
was
much.
great.
Likewise, I enjoyed it immensely.
Thanks a lot, Don.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we are going to wrap up the show now. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Rory, for co-hosting with me
No problem.
today.
That was great.
You will not be rehired to do it again unless Scouty's out. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
But you'll.
What if I improve on my looks?
Okay. But you're always jumping in on the
Yeah,
show and that,
absolutely.
and booking guests
Absolutely.
for us, and so yeah. But I appreciate short notice coming in.
Glad I could help with the sound.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Please follow us on, I'm going to do Gowdy's bit and butcher that as well. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's all at Crownsman P. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's a little bell there, too, that you can get so you actually get notifications. And believe me, when you subscribe, YouTube will send you notifications, because I get lots now. And you can always listen to our podcast. I think we're on...
We are on Apple Podcasts. We're on Google Podcasts. We are on Spotify. We are now also on the first one we were on.
Anchor.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Anchor.
There's a whole bunch of them. So basically,
Yeah.
look up the Crownsman
Wherever
podcast.
you listen to podcasts, look us up and find all the episodes there.
Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and we will see you for the next show.